welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is 10 cards that I think you should be putting in your Commander decks. There are about 27,000 cards available in the Commander format. That's a whole lot. Most people don't want to comb through them all looking for ones that might fit in their Commander decks. Have no fear. That's what I'm here for. I love looking through cards, especially older ones, to find gems that might be great in the Commander format, and that's what this series is all about. Most of these cards will fall into two categories. Either it's just a generally good card that I think probably should get a little bit more love in the Commander format and doesn't really see much play, likely because it's an older card and people aren't aware of it, or it is a very specific card that is incredibly niche, but if you happen to be in one of those themes, it's an absolute slam dunk, and that's another reason why I mention these cards. We'll start out with one that certainly fits into that second category, Arcanum Wings, 1 and a blue, enchantment aura, enchanted creature has flying, and has the completely unique ability of Aura Swap, 2 and a blue. This is the only card in all of Magic that has this ability. Of course, it was from Future Sight. That's why I encourage you to go check out that set. You want to find some fantastic gems. But what does Aura Swap do? You can pay 2 and a blue, exchange this aura with an aura card in your hand. So of course, this has got to be in play, enchanted on a creature, and then you just swap it out with something in your hand. Of course, that can be fantastic to cheat auras into play. Now, how many aura decks are in blue? Maybe not a ton, but if you are in an aura deck in blue, this seems like a pretty fantastic slam dunk, right? This can be done at instant speed, which is really, really important. If you're in a deck that's playing auras in blue, as niche as that might be, this is obviously going to be a great include for you. Let's talk about Arena of Ancients, 3 mana artifact. Legendary creatures don't untap during their controller's untap step. Yikes, that could be pretty brutal in a lot of games, right? When Arena of Ancient enters the battlefield, tap all legendary creatures. So it's going to come into play, it's going to tap all legendary creatures, and they're not going to untap. Obviously, this can be fantastic if you happen to be playing in a play group where guys play lots of legendary tribal type of decks, but obviously pretty much every Commander deck is going to have a legendary creature, some better than others, and some really, really badly don't want to be tapped. This is a Staxy effect. It's a colorless Staxy effect, so sometimes that can be important. If you have a legendary creature that either you don't care if it's tapped because it just has a static ability and it doesn't matter if it's tapped or not, or maybe you're in one of those decks where you don't really care if your commander's in play at all, this can be a very helpful card in a Commander game. Ashen Powder, 2 black sorcery. Put target creature card from an opponent's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So just a very simple effect of I take your best creature out of your graveyard and I put it into play under my control. Probably the best fit for this, I imagine, is in a milling deck, because obviously you're milling your opponents a whole lot. Their graveyards are going to be very full with lots of juicy creatures that you can steal from them, right? This just sits in your hand while you're milling, and as soon as you see a Vorinclex or an Avacyn or some really powerful creature you want, 4 mana, I'll take that, put it into play under my control. Obviously, there are also some commanders in black that want to be controlling your opponent's creatures, a little bit of an exchange theme, whatever the case may be. It'll also work there as well, but this is one of those cards that you could put this in any deck, I think, and you will never be disappointed. Chances are one of your opponents at some point during the game is going to have a really great creature go to the graveyard that you're going to want. Coming in at number 4, Aura Flux. And if you have troubles dealing with enchantments in your mono blue deck, this might be a decent way, at least, to handle it. 2 and a blue enchantment. Other enchantments have, at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this enchantment unless you pay 2. So it is, again, that Staxy type of effect for enchantments. You obviously don't want to be playing this if you're playing a lot of enchantments. But of course, there's a whole lot of themes in blue that aren't playing enchantments. A Spellslinger theme would be a great one. Typically, you're not going to have a lot of enchantments in a Spellslinger deck. Red and blue are not very good at dealing with enchantments, can't really deal with them at all. And there are a lot of really, really powerful enchantments in the format. I know this is not guaranteed going to get rid of them, but it is a way to make your opponent's lives a little bit more difficult. Speaking of enchantments, Aura Fracture, 2 and a white enchantment. Sacrifice a land to destroy target enchantment. This is a much more effective way to deal with enchantments. It is a repeatable destroy target enchantment. You don't see that very much. Now, of course, you do have to sacrifice a land, so obviously if you're in a theme like that, which I myself happen to have a deck that is white, that is sacrificing lands, I have this in there. It's fantastic. No No enchantment is safe as long as this sits on the battlefield. In all honesty, this can act as an Aura Shards where it is just a deterrent that your opponents just aren't going to play their really powerful enchantments when this is on the battlefield. I promise you, although sacrificing a land doesn't seem like a great cost, it's totally worth it. If your opponent has one of those really powerful enchantments that are available in the format that we see all the time, it's totally worth it, I think, to sacrifice a land to get it off the table immediately. Obviously, this is a slam dunk in any theme where you might want to be sacrificing lands, but I honestly think that there's a lot of themes you could put this in where it would work, because destroying enchantments is really, really important in the format. Coming in at number 6, Avatar of Fury, 6 red, Avatar 6/6. So an 8 mana 6/6, that's not great. However, if an opponent controls 7 or more lands, this spell costs 6 less to cast and has flying, and pay a red. Avatar Fury gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So the fire breathing ability, this card was reprinted in C11 because of course they figured it would be a great card in the Commander format, and I concur. I think it's pretty good. It is just a 6/6 flying pumpable creature. Okay, I know that's not super exciting, but it is entirely likely that you will only pay 2 red mana for this. That's it. An opponent controlling 7 or more lands, that happens on like turn 4 in the Commander format, right? I mean, it's very easy to get this guy out for only 2 mana. And even in the Commander format, with all the busted things we're doing, a 2 mana flying 6/6 is pretty darn good. So this is just a good creature that you could put in, say, any mono red deck, and it's going to be decent. However, again, there are some specific themes where it is extra good, and those themes are the ones where you want high mana value stuff in play, but of course you don't want to pay the 8 mana. Here you can pay 2, right? You can pay 2 mana for this, and then when it's on the battlefield, it is an 8 mana value creature. That can be really important. You can deal damage or draw cards or whatever equal to that permanence mana value, right? That kind of stuff. So a deck like that, I think it's actually a really good fit as well. Let's talk about the only real green counter spell there is in the format or in the game of Magic, Avoid Fate. 1 green mana instant, counter target instant or aura spell that targets a permanent you control. So of course, it's not great. It's very specific, but it's mono green, right? So obviously it's not going to be nearly as good as the blue ones. It's a mono green counter spell. It is the only real mono green counter spell. I know people will say, hey, Veil of Summer, that's a counter spell and it's way better. I will tell you why. Well, first of all, Veil of Summer is not a counter spell. Nowhere on it does it say counter anything. Also though, I will tell you why it can be. I'm not saying it's a better card than Veil of Summer. I will tell you where it can be though. Veil of Summer obviously doesn't allow your stuff to be countered, so that's going to do something that Avoid Fate isn't going to do. It's also going to give you and your permanents hexproof from blue and black, which I guess those are decent colors to get hexproof from. But if I had to pick a color to get hexproof from, of course it would be white, because white by far has the best removal and the most popular removal, right? Swords to Plowshares is far and away the most popular removal spell in the format. Veil of Summer will do nothing there. Avoid Fate will. Counter target instant, right? Of course, all the best removal in the format are instants of varying colors, and that's what Avoid Fate is going to be best for, protecting your stuff, but also counters those auras, and that's not nothing, right? Song of Dryads is a popular card in the format, and that's a great thing to protect against as well. Darksteel Mutation would be another one. So not the greatest card ever, but it is very unique, and you know, it's one of those things where, hey, I got a green counterspell in my deck, right? One of those nice gotcha moments in a Commander game. Let's talk about Aura Thief. 3 and a blue, illusion 2/2 with flying. When Aura Thief dies, you gain control of all enchantments. That seems like a pretty great ability, right? This is one of those cards that people just used to shoehorn into all their decks because, again, there's so many great enchantments in the Commander format, and you just gain control of all of them as soon as this guy dies. That is fantastic. It also is just a great, don't attack me because I'll chump with my Aura Thief and then I'll gain control of all your enchantments, right? So it almost works in a pillow fort sort of a way as well. It used to be one of those cards that people would put in any deck. You could easily put this in any deck. And again, blue doesn't deal with enchantments very well, but it's just great value as well. It works extra good in certain themes. It's an illusion. So if you're in that illusion tribal deck, seems like an easy shoehorn into a deck like that. Sacrifice theme is probably the best. If you're in a blue deck where you have, you know, instant feed sack outlets are going to be important here because of course it gets exiled. You get nothing. You're going to want to sacrifice it in response. So a deck like that is an extra good fit. A really unique, really interesting card here coming in in at number 9. Where exactly does it fit? I don't know, but I'd like to mention the cards that just have entirely unique effects because it can be important. Ashling's Prerogative. 1 in a red enchantment. As it enters the battlefield, choose odd or even. Each creature with mana value of the chosen quality has haste. Each creature without mana value of the chosen quality enters the battlefield tapped. So it is a way to give your creatures haste and have all your opponent's creatures enter the battlefield tapped, or some of their creatures enter the battlefield tapped. Obviously, it's a bit of a crapshoot, right? You don't know what your opponents are going to be doing. You can pick odd or even based on that. You're going to likely put this in your deck, I think, because your commander is a certain mana value. Let's say it's even, and it's a way that I can give my commander haste because I want to attack with it right away. It's not the greatest way ever, but it will work, and maybe I can give some of my other creatures haste as well. I suppose I could also give some of my opponent's creatures haste as well, but you're putting it in your deck as that advantage. And then also you can possibly use it for the other option, which is, okay, now I have an opponent that has a really scary commander that maybe it's got haste, it can attack right away. I really don't want it to. Whatever that mana value is, I'll name that, right? If that's even, now I don't even care about my commander having haste anymore. I can just name their commander, and their commander is going to come into play tapped, so I don't have to worry about attacking right away. I know it's super niche, but it is just a very interesting, unique card, and I got to give it a mention. Coming in at number 10 this time is Aven Mimiomancer. 1 white and a blue bird wizard, 3/1 with flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a feather counter on target creature. If you do, that creature has base power and toughness 3/1 and has flying for as long as it has a feather counter on it. I'm happy to see that this card actually was reprinted in New Capenna Commander after I had originally mentioned it on my 10 card series because it is such a unique card. I think they had a counter theme there with the New Capenna Commander. That's probably why they threw that in there. That's one of the ways you can use this, right? I know you're looking at this and you're maybe thinking Bird Tribal. It could work in Bird Tribal. This is just a very unique card, and there's a bunch of neat ways that you can use it, right? On the beginning of your upkeep, you're going to put a feather counter on target creature. Now, of course, I gotta mention feather counters are actually a thing, particularly with Kangi Airy Keeper, where that's a absolute slam dunk in that deck for obvious reasons, because all birds get +1/+1 for each feather counter on Kangi Airy Keeper, and you're supposed to use that with the kicker on your commander, but you can also, of course, use Aven Mimiomancer and put a counter on your commander every upkeep, increasing the anthem that you're giving with your commander. Obviously that will work, but outside of that, there's a lot of neat ways to use this card. I actually had thrown this card in my Danik deck briefly. The reason why is because it gives my creatures flying and also turns them into 3/1s, and that is a very low mana value creature deck. I have a lot of creatures that are just 1/1s. They're there for value, and I had a little bit of trouble closing out games, so why not turn that 1/1 creature that's just sitting around waiting to be sacrificed into a 3/1 flyer? Now it's actually a threat, right? I can very easily turn my creatures into a decent threat. That's a great way to use this card. You can also, and why I particularly like it, and I always mention cards like this on lists like this, because in the Commander format, a card that you can use on your opponent as well gets a lot better. You can use this on your opponents. If my opponent has a Blightsteel Colossus, I can give it flying. Okay, maybe that's not the greatest thing in the world, but now it's only a 3/1, right? This is actually changing the base power and toughness of that creature. So that really scary Blightsteel Colossus is now only a 3/1. And I would say a 3/1 flying indestructible trample infect creature is way less scary than the original thing, right? It's not going to be a 1-hit kill. It's going to be like a 4-hit kill. So that's another neat way to use this. I'm just using it on my own creatures, and then, oh, my opponent plays a big scary creature and I can make it way less scary. I mean, you're turning your opponent's creature into a toughness of 1. That makes it a lot easier to kill, right? So that can be really important. It is also putting counters on creatures. It is targeting creatures. It is actually doing a lot, believe it or not, even though it might not look like much. Really, really interesting card that I think could probably go in a few different decks. That is it. That is all. 10 more cards that I think you guys should be putting in your Commander decks. Let me know if you're playing any of these already in the Commander format. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.